Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about the top cards you should consider sideboarding for November 2021. This is the sideboarding guide going into Nationals, so it's going to be a bit more in depth. We got more cards to talk about than we usually do. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways to do so down in the description. But guys, if you want to step your game up, check out the Patreon down in the description. You can read the articles that I post there and inquire about some coaching if you are interested in that. Anyways, let's get started. Alright, so if you guys couldn't tell already, the first deck we're talking about siding against is Cell Surge. Now, I did a whole video about a week ago talking about how to specifically counter the deck Cell Surge. So if you want more tips on that, go check that video out. But in terms of just specifically sideboarding, Dabura Ritual at Hand is probably everyone's go-to card, and it's a super powerful card. They pitch it out of your hand with like a rebrand or something. You play it for one, you draw two. Very, very powerful. But Cell Surge does have answers to this card, mostly in the form of Dark Power, Black Mass Sand, and Focus Breakthrough. Some players play that card. So you got to be kind of careful with how you're using Dabura. Obviously, you can see if they have BMS on the field. You can't really tell if they're going to use Focus Breakthrough on you, but it's still an absolutely incredible card. Like, most decks will play this card, especially aggro decks, which pretty much already have a pretty decent Cell Surge matchup game one, but still, like, they can't dedicate too much energy to rebranding you, to playing BMS. They have to be careful because they have to worry about not dying to the aggro deck, right? So you're probably going to get away with Dabura much more so in aggro decks than you are in like mid-range and control decks. And that's where Goku Sand Instincts comes in. If you're playing a deck like Soul Striker, like Icarus, anything just like slower paced where Cell Surge is very safe to, you know, tap 2 for rebrand on turn 2, play their unit on 3, start taking your hand away. Those are absolutely the type of decks where you're going to want Sand Instincts in your sideboard, most likely complementing Dabura Ritual at Hand. So some number of both, maybe like 3 Dabura, 2 Instincts, or some vice versa number of that, or maybe even 3-3. Those are the types of matchups you're going to want Sand Instincts because, one, they have time to set up BMS, so your Daburas might not be as effective, and then you need another way to clear BMS, which is a whole different discussion. But besides that, you still want to be able to use Sand Instincts if you can't use Dabura, and if the game's going long, you just need more answers to hand control because, again, aggro, they're going to end the game quicker, so they only need to deal with like maybe 4-6 cards being discarded. If you're playing a slower deck, you are very likely going to have like 8, 9, 10 cards discarded from your hand over the course of the game, and in that case you want Sand Instincts complementing Dabura to try and make up for that. Next up, we have Big Amora and Blue Impulse, 2 cards coming out of the sideboard for green. Now, the most popular green deck is probably easily Cell Surge, but you've also got people playing Green Majin Buu for aggro. Green Gotenks hasn't picked up popularity, and you've also got King Cold, which is like pretty rarely rogue, right? So these are great cards coming out of the sideboard for green, both for different matchups though, but we'll talk about where they're good. So Big Amora, the main thing here is that it stops battle cards cost 5 or higher from attacking you. Now, just name a few matchups where that's good. You've got Gogeta Xeno and Jiren. This card is very, very good in both those matchups, stopping their most threatening cards from attacking you. And the number one appeal for Big Amora for me is that it's a floodgate type card that your opponent cannot interact with. Yes, it is a little expensive, costing 2 energy, but compare this to like Buu Unadulterated Malice, where that's also 2 energy, and if it's counterplayed, you just pretty much lost those 2 energy for no reason. So Big Amora is very nice. Yes, it's a bit more specific in like it only stops 5 or higher, as where Buu can punish anything from attacking, but with the smaller stuff, if you can kind of deal with it, stopping their big Gogetas from attacking, stopping their big Jirens from attacking, and then other rogue matchups, even like a random Dark Broly, like stopping those 30Ks from attacking, that is very, very good. Even compared to like Dormant Potential Unleashed, that doesn't stop the first 2 attacks, and it costs you an extra card. Don't get me wrong, Dormant's incredible, but Big Amora is a card you might want to consider because so many aggro decks are cheating out big cost guys. Then we have Blue Impulse, so this is going to be more for like your mid-range matchups, like again, your Icarus and your Soul Strikers. Basically, when they play cards during your turn, you can wipe their entire board, unfortunately not Enduring Barrier, but it'll only cost you 1 energy if you have a Unison in play. And when you're playing like a mid-range matchup, like let's say a Gotenks versus a Soul Striker or an Icarus, getting those incremental advantages is absolutely key to winning the matchup. And Blue Impulse, if you can take out 3, 4, 5 battle cards, that is such a huge value swing that it's going to be very, very tough for them to come back from. So incredible, incredible card, especially if you're playing, again, like a mid-range green, like a Gotenks or a King Cold. Super, super strong. Next up is Broly Crown Retribution. Now, I dare say this may be the best red generic card. Like, if you're playing red, heavily consider mainboarding this card. But if you're not going to mainboard it, you absolutely have to sideboard it, not even probably. This card is so ridiculous, especially in this format where things are much more mid-rangey. Yes, aggro exists and even control exists, but this card's also great against control as well. Your opponent's probably going to be leaving up 2 energy. Then you get that hand knowledge. You can take cards out of their hand. If they're playing battle card floodgates like Robotic Riposte or Boo Unadulterated Malice, you get to pick those out of their hand and then go in. If you're playing red aggro like Jiren or U7 Gohan or red Broly, for example, this card is incredible in those types of decks. Or if your opponent doesn't even have those types of floodgates, you're either baiting out a counterplay or you're looking at their hand, picking a super combo, but just getting that hand knowledge is so key. This card, again, I think is probably the MVP for red. Like, I've just heard players say how incredible it is. I have firsthand experience with how crazy this card is, and in this format, I think it's just even more incredible. So again, heavily consider mainboarding it, but if not, you got to be sideboarding 3 copies 110%. Then we have Gohan Piccolo's Skill Sharpened. So this is a specific blue sideboard tech to remove low-cost battle cards. And what this is really important against is Gogeta Xeno, right? They're going to be spamming their True Fighting Spirits, especially if you're playing blue. So it's very, very important that you're able to remove them. But this can also be good in a bunch of random matchups. This can be good against Jiren, where they're playing a bunch of their 1-drops. Pay 1, get rid of them. Now they lost a bunch of their evolved targets, meaning they've lost a lot of their aggressive pressure, right? But I list this card specifically, but I think whatever color, whatever deck you're playing, you want to look at very specific ways where you can deal with a multitude of 1-drops. I think that's a very, very important thing to look at. Now, if you're in different colors, like maybe red, you're looking at -5k abilities. Yellow, I think it's a little bit harder to find answer cards that deal with 1-drops that are not overwhelms, but still, whatever color you're in, you want to be looking at different ways to clear 1-drops. It's very, very important, again, for Gogeta Xeno, for Jiren. If your deck is weak to Dark Power, Black Mass Sand, you definitely want to be able to remove that. And then again, going back to like the Cell Surge thing, if you're sideboarding Deborah, you definitely need ways to clear BMS. So not only will you be siding in Deborah and maybe Sand Instincts, but if you're blue, for example, you might also be siding in this card because it'll help you deal with the BMS. That is very, very important. But we just talked about how to help blue. Now let's talk about how to punish blue. Burnish Bonds, Borgos, and all the cards like it, like Urgent Aid Kami, Godly Destruction Whis. I believe every single color has one except for black now. So basically, these 1-drops are a lot better than they used to be, and that's because blue lost the Galactic Buster engine. So it's a bit tougher for blue to actually remove this card, at least as far as their pure main deck is concerned, right? So playing this card can be really, really good. Now, if you're playing against blue with like some sort of arrival package, you probably want to end your turn playing this card. You probably don't want to play it and then start attacking, because if they arrive and have some way to remove this, that's going to be a pretty big feels bad. So yeah, you want to play this card, you know, pretty strategically, but still make it difficult for them to remove it, because this card like single-handedly kind of just dunks on Soul Striker. They can't activate their leader's skill. They can't offensively Senzu Bean, otherwise you're just going to blow up their energy. And again, without like the Galactic Buster engine offering them such easy removal, this card is a bit more difficult for them to get around, especially in the mono blue version, which is lacking more removal than ever, at least in the early stages of the game. So incredible card for your Soul Striker and other random blue matchups. Then we have 2 just super staple sideboard cards that I want to talk about later, because they're not as like generically great as they have been in the past, but they're still worth talking about. So firstly, Makikabora, the Broken Seal, is just really, really good against your linear strategy. So for example, Gogeta Xeno, you just call Gogeta 6 and they can't play any of their fusions on you. But you do want to be very, very careful in using this card against Gogeta Xeno, because if they already have a Gogeta on the board from the previous turn, you got to really like kind of take into account how much is Makikabora actually going to help you survive to the next turn if they have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 Gogetas on board already. That's something you got to really, really consider. If you can't board wipe them and play Makikabora, it's not going to be as effective. But if you've gone first, they didn't play a Gogeta on turn 1, you go to your turn 2, play Makikabora. That's a really great way to get into your turn 3 with a lot of life. So that's really, really good. Otherwise, this is really good against a matchup like Invoker. where they pretty much have to play Rival Seeker to go into their boss monsters. So that can be really good there. You got to just look at your opponent's deck and see, like, you know, if they really rely on a specific type of boss monster. Another example would be Green Gotenks, just called Gotenks 6-drop, and this card is absolutely incredible in a matchup like that. So again, look at your opponent's deck, look at your opponent's strategy, and if they're playing something that relies on a very specific boss card, Makika board is great. On the other hand, Dark Power Black Mass Sand is going to be decent against some random rogue aggro decks. Like one, for example, is going to be Red Jiren. This card is very, very good against Red Jiren. We just did a video last week talking about how to counter Red Jiren, and this is the first card that we talked about because it stops their leader from looking at top 7 and playing a 1-drop, and it stops their Unison from playing a 1-drop. You're basically stopping those extra free plays, and that's going to lead to them having less of a board to put pressure onto you, right? Now, Jiren can out this card, but it requires them to have a specific turn 1 combo that I mentioned in the countering Jiren video, so it's not always going to happen, but otherwise, this is also good against a random deck like Agents of Destruction, right? So it really just depends on the aggro deck you're playing against. A lot of times now, aggro decks actually play battle cards that are bigger than 15k. That's just how kind of aggro has kind of been power crept over the past couple years. So you do got to keep that in mind. I wish this card was better against Gogeta Xeno, but they have pretty easy ways to remove it that won't even trigger it. So I wouldn't really recommend it for that matchup. But BMS can be good. And of course, if you're playing Cell Surge, odds are you're sideboarding 3 copies of Dark Power Black Mass Sand, so it is an important sideboard card to mention, even though it's not the greatest coverall like it kind of used to be. Then we have your 1-drop extra cards. I talk about these cards all the time. If you guys have been around the channel, you should know how much I value these cards. Nowadays, Gogeta Xeno is even maining 2 copies of Super Kamehameha, but it is pretty realistic in my opinion to sideboard into a 3rd copy. That seems really, really good. If you're in yellow, Tyrannical Blow can help you deal with a lot of floodgates like Robotic Riposte, like Topo Righteous Aid, and even if you're counterplaying a non-floodgate battle card, just timing it where you can get that negation on a battle card or unison that your opponent controls is super, super good. When I was streaming the Pro Sport TCG weekend, I saw that play where someone Tyrannical Blow just like a super random battle card, and then they were able to negate their opponent's Supreme Kai of Time, Space Time Unraveler on the board. That was just a super, super pro play. So stuff like that can make that card super high value. And then finally, guys, we have Secret Identity Mass Sand and Fu Shrouded in Mystery. Now, the reason I have these both listed here is because it seems like you should be like maining and siding some number of these cards. Secret ID is just absolutely incredible against all the tokens in the format. So you have like the Goku Black Rose that spams 4 blocker tokens. You've even got the blocker negates like Freeze Army Reinforcements, Chilled Army Reinforcements, stuff like that. And then Fu Shrouded Mystery is just super, super important for those random like control matchups like Sin Shenron, like Hachiyak, even Invoker. This card is just absolutely incredible in those types of matchups where you might be disadvantaged otherwise. You're going to want to heavily consider like maybe maining 2 Identity and siding 1 Shroud, or maining 1 and 1 and then siding the 2nd Secret ID. That can be a really good strategy as well. So hopefully this video helped you guys out getting ready for Nationals. I do want to know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time.